item 4 to items, it just flip-flop item 4 and item number 3, if we could.
Mayor, if there's no conversation, I'd like to motion to approve the agenda as outlined by reversing item 4 and 3 as outlined.
A motion, I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Presentation and discussion of the 2020 World Championship Ironman. Greater Zion Convention. The whole name, Kevin.
There you
Greater
go.
Zion Convention and Tourism Office. How
Awesome.
do you feel about that?
Well, I'm excited about it. I hope you guys like that too. The new brand. We opened that up to be more inclusive to everybody in the county and the way we're marketing. And so anyway, threw a little swag on your desk there, but
Thank you.
this is really fun for me. Just saying, it's like coming home for me because I live right over the hill here and know so many of you so well. Yeah, it's good to be here. But appreciate the opportunity too. Kurt Ivy invited me to come participate and kind of share what's going on in the future of Ironman, and it's a lot different than it was. And so I think we'll just talk through what's happened this year and where we're heading. So in May, we signed a 5-year agreement with Ironman to do essentially 7 races over the next 5 years. 2 of those are full distance Ironman races like we had in 2010, 11, and 12. Those will be this year, 2020, and we'll talk kind of detail on that if we can. I think it's good for us to go over that. And then again in 2023. So that'll be a rotating full distance race. And the concept behind that was we had such an epic race. It was talked about so much, but it was because of the difficulty of it and everything, a lot of different circumstances, we switched it to the 70.3, which ended up being a real positive for the whole county. It let us build a base of triathletes. We had the North American Championship, and so we got all the top pros in, and pretty soon St. George and this area was recognized as the triathlon destination, and set us up to get the World Championship. And so that's the other piece of the puzzles. We won this World Championship for 2021. And then in the mix, we'll have our regular North American Championship 70.3. So 2020 will be a full. 2021 we'll do 70.3 in May, the World Championship in September, and then in 2022 we go back to the 70.3 North American Championship. 2023 will be a full again, and 2024 will be a 70.3. So it'll keep us on our toes, keep it interesting. And you can see there the economic impact of those 7 races. And the reason I say 7, the World Championship is actually 2 races, a women's race on Friday and a men's race on Saturday. So we'll talk more about that too. But we wanted to take some time and kind of go over the 2020 race because it really is different this year. The course with changes on SR7 and the construction that's going on out there forced us to push it back this way, and it's really going to impact Washington City substantially more than it has in the past. And so I think we can like to talk through that. This is the bike route, 112 miles, and so what they'll do, I think you can see it a little bit better on this map, maybe. So it starts out at Sand Hollow Reservoir. They do the 2.4 mile swim. They come out of the reservoir and they'll go north on Sand Hollow Road, do a little bit of back and forth there to get some mileage, and then they come back out onto SR7 and head towards the freeway, the airport and the freeway. So they'll go all the way to I-15 on SR7, turn around and come back. And on the route back, they get off at Washington Dam Road there. And that's where then serious impact to Washington City, because we come up Washington Dam Road to Washington Fields Road or 300 East. That brings us up to Telegraph, where it turns right and goes up Telegraph to the Washington Parkway, and then over the Parkway, and then it starts to get more back to where it was before, through Buena Vista Boulevard and up Cactus Lane and then back into Middleton, over Red Hills Parkway to Snow Canyon, where it goes up Snow Canyon this year, up 18 to Vail, turns and then comes down the Vail Road, the Gunlock Road, all the way to Santa Clara area, flips back up and goes up into Ivins and then back into town.
Kevin wanted to make this really easy.
Yeah.
A few hills.
just the one of the objectives of this was actually trying to make it a little lighter, but I don't know that we accomplished too much.
It's
of that.
funny because a lot of people have said it's easier, but you still have Snow Canyon, and then on the way back through Vail, there's still lots of rolling hills that really beat you up.
Yep.
So it's quite interesting how it's just different.
So you're not going to go up the Gunlock Hill this time.
We'll come down it. Yeah. So they'll go up 18.
So there'll be lots of crashes at the bottom of the wall.
Okay. Look at the arrows. 'Cause it used to be the other way, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, when Craig did it before, it was 2 loops going the other way, although you didn't do Snow Canyon. So
Which is tougher, I think.
Snow Canyon's tougher.
I've done the full twice.
Yeah. And I offered him a slot for this one just a minute ago.
If the mayor will give me time off, then we'll talk about it. But then he's got to get it past my wife, and she'll say no.
She'll say no. So if he's declining, any of the rest of you?
No, I am not.
I just want to help out
Yeah.
and watch it and get excited
Well, we'll
about
be
it.
cooking pancakes.
Yes. So
Yeah. So up there in Buena Vista would still work. They can get up Main Street.
So will the time frame be a little later?
Yeah, and Doug's actually got the time frames. In fact, why don't you? Doug Boyer is from our. He's our sports guy. So
How's it going? So just real quick, it looks like, according to Dave Reed and kind of what he's estimating, the first athlete on the bike will be turning on to Washington Dam Road about 9 a.m. And then of that group,
Road,
Washington Dam Road at 9 a.m.
20 minutes and they'd be up by us.
So what was that?
when will they be to?
What would they be up like on Buena Vista Boulevard?
Buena Vista will be
Yeah.
If he's at 9,
will be at about 9:30. Yeah, at about 9:30.
20 minutes.
Yep.
That works. So it's a little
Oh, we'll
later.
make it work. We just,
we
if
want
it's,
to be there when they come through.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
we won't have to set up until like 8:30.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they'll exit your guys' jurisdiction at about 2:00 when the last biker will go through.
Can you remind me, when is the date of the
What's the
Ironman
date
this
on
year?
that one?
The
May
second.
2nd, that's right.
Yep. Yep.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, that's helpful. So again, can't say enough about how much we appreciate Washington City and their effort in this round, because it really does slices right up the city in several directions, and it does it for quite a long time, 9 a.m. to about 2 p.m. But it should be fun, right? We'll make the best of that. And then just to keep on the theme of make it easier. This is the run course, just so you can see kind of where that's at. Starts at Town Square in St. George and runs up Main Street, up diagonal. And this time, instead of going up onto Red Hills Parkway, we loop down Snow Canyon Parkway and hit it's called the Halfway Wash Trail over there in kind of North St. George that runs. So we'll be on a trail all the way down to Dixie Drive. And then they jump out on Dixie Drive and go down a little ways to Mathis Park down there, if you know where that is. And they'll loop around Mathis and come back out, go back to Town Square and do it again, just for fun. Yeah. So 2-loop bike course, or run course, sorry. Yeah. And first athlete across the finish line, probably about roughly 8 to 9 hours. So if it starts at 7, you're going to be, 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, something like
I
that.
think Doug's getting ready to go do that.
Yeah.
I was just trying to think. I was trying to think of what mileage does it no longer matter that you're looping over the same point? You're just,
Looks like the same
you're just
thing after the
running.
stop right here.
It always matters.
Yeah. And then, of course, the last athlete at midnight, and would really encourage you to, if you know anybody, to send them down to the finish line around 10 p.m. and just hang out and watch those last 2 hours. It's an event like no other. I always say it's the only event I've ever been to where the last person across the finish line gets more applause than the first. and it really is amazing. Everybody floods down to the finish line, and there's just all kinds of energy, and you just see these people pushing and coming to the end after 17 hours. It's really a neat event. So, any other questions about this year's race?
I would just ask you to speak to the school district and what they've.
Yeah,
That was exciting to me too.
yeah. So, and that will go into our World Championship discussion. I'll pull along. The next piece of this is this Ironman World Championship, September 13th through the 18th. Really, activities kind of start on Tuesday, and then the women's race on Friday and the men's race on Saturday. And what Kurt is alluding to is that we're having this Friday race. The school district has agreed to make that a non-school day on that Friday. So all the kids will be out of school. Yeah. And we're encouraging them. I think the concept is teachers can fluctuate their workday, their teacher work days. And I think the school district is really open to if they want to move their teacher workday to another day, they could do that so they can participate too. And we've got some pretty exciting things going on, campaigns and things that we'll be doing with the school children to get them involved. We just want everybody to be a part of this. This is really an exciting race. The photo on the bottom there is in Nice, France, where the race was this year, right on the Mediterranean. It's been in Austria in 2015, the Sunshine Coast of Australia, Nelson Mandela Bay in South Africa, Nice, France, and that's right where the race course was there in Nice. And I did go to Nice, yeah, and I've got some insights I'll share from that, coming back from that. And this year, 2020 in New Zealand, in Tokor, New Zealand. So it's so fun to be on the circuit with that kind of destinations. I mean, for us, it's just, we're part of the elite. And I keep saying this is a bit like our Olympics, right? If we were to have the Olympics, the opportunity for something like the Olympics, that's what this will be. Let me show you what New Zealand, this is a video that New Zealand's put together to kind of announce what they're doing and kind of get you a feel for what it's about.
Ready for goosebumps.
Kau ki matanu, kau ki matanu, kau ki te whenua hai whenu. Mai we kai te manawa o tau hau, tūpana. I arrive with unknown land below me. I arrive with unknown skies above me. You have stolen the heart of the stranger. For 28 generations, Lati Tuwhaetoa have spoken of the great journey made from Hawaii across Polynesia by our Tohunga, the High Priest, Ngātoroidani. The navigator embarking on a journey across the Pacific aboard the Great Waka Te Aroha. Our bond with Hawaii remains as the fires that fill our mountains, the sacred fires, from the great peaks of Hawaii to our home in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Our fire-filled mountains are ready. Our crystal clear waters are ready. Our people are ready. Are you? In 2020, for the first time, the Ironman 70.3 World Championship comes to Tokyo, Aotearoa, New Zealand, the home of the longest running Ironman outside of Kona, Hawaii. Mauna loa ki Tahiti, tōngari o ki Tapa. Voted amongst the world's best Ironman races, Lake Taupo, the Great Lake filled with fresh water of glacial clarity, the trout-filled rivers and rejuvenating hot springs from deep within Papatūāna, Earth Mother, will play host to the swim course. A challenging and picturesque rural white course beginning on the shores of Lake Tone, crossing the mighty Waikato River, delivers you through geothermal valleys before returning you, the warrior, onto a lakefront running course framed by the awe-inspiring Tongariro National Park and a town centre finish line. Your journey will be varied. Your goals may differ. Our desire to welcome you is immense. Our greatest warriors across the generations have battled adversity to succeed. They have walked inward and upwards, searching for the greatest strength. We welcome your strength, drawn from your lands through your feet. We welcome your waters, like the blood through your veins, to your heartbeat, your rhythm. May the guardians of our mountains keep you safe. May the memory of this experience lie warm in your hearts forever. No mai, haere mai, welcome to Taupo, Aotearoa, New Zealand.
It's kind of fun to be in company with folks like that. So what we learned, well, we've got some great support to be able to pull this off. This was not a cheap thing to do, but the Utah Sports Commission jumped in on board with the World Championship extensively, financially. The school district, like we talked about, helping us out. Washington County and St. George City have both talked about creating a holiday type of a day on that Friday. So in some form, they're going to allow their employees to take the day in, if they participate in the event in some kind of volunteer level, to be part of it that way and then get that day off. So I think that's huge, because we're going to need every parking space possible downtown St. George. We're going to need all access to things. And so to get the big businesses and the big entities to let their, their employees take that, and then to be part of it, to celebrate with it in the volunteer level and whatever, make it happen. I think it's going to be good. So we'd encourage Washington City to do something similar to that. I know you won't be impacted as much as the downtown area, but we're going to have the street. The course will be similar to last year's race, the 70.3 race. So it'll most likely come down SR9 to Coral Canyon and up Telegraph and then up and over. So that same course, but boy, wouldn't it be great to just line the streets with school kids and every, bands and whatever, as those athletes are coming through for that 70.3 race. We're hoping to get, everybody involved and just create a celebration out of it. What I learned from Nice, so they had 110 countries participate in that event. There's only, I think, 170 countries in the world. So pretty good representation from across the globe. 5,700 athletes were in France. They're projecting, this is growing. They project about 7,000 in St. George, because the U.S. will attract more anyway. There's more triathletes in the U.S., but they figure about 2,800 will be from outside the United States, and they'll bring about 17,000 family and friends with them. The economic impact is about 25 million is what's projected for that week. And just as a comparison, the airport reconstruction project was a 4-month project that brought in about 24 million in economic impact in the labor and all that they did for that. So in 1 week, this event is going to bring in the same amount that a major construction project like that did. So that kind of gives you an idea of what it's about. Like I said, the course will be similar to what it was before. We'll have SR7 done to SR9 at that point, and so it'll probably just take that loop and then come around. But that's still being determined. But I'm pretty sure you'll see it come through in a similar pattern there. The run course is kind of unique. On this one, they really wanted to do a 2-loop run course where you could get some more athlete interaction with the locals. And so instead of going up on Red Hills Parkway and back down, it used to go up diagonal and up and then back around. What they're talking about doing is going straight up, Skyline Drive there that goes right up, taking them right out of Town Square and up on top of the bluff that way, and then bring them around and down and then go back and do that again. So they get to go up that hill twice. I love the fact that the street right before that is Hope Street. I just think that's classic.
Well, I didn't go that route, but that's going to be horrible.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Really feel it, honestly.
Oh,
What I learned in Nice, and this is something that I really, really appreciate, is it's as much about the place as it is the race. They design all of the graphics that celebrate your area, all of the messaging and everything. We're starting to talk themes here with their crew. That center picture, I was in Nice, but that's Holly Lawrence's family. And, Holly Lawrence has won our race twice. So she's competing in the World Championship. That's her entire family was there to support that as one of the top pros. And that's the kind of contingencies that you get. And everybody just celebrating the area and what there is to do there. So, but a couple of key concerns, and this is one of the reasons I'm glad to be here, is just getting our community to embrace the magnitude of it. We've been doing Ironman for 10 years. It gets, kind of like, oh yeah, we've done that before. This one's going to be different, and we need to ratchet it up a notch. I'd say we're about 80%. We've got most of that covered, but there's another 20% that we just got to dial in. And so embracing the magnitude of it, you can kind of see the impacts of it. That the banquet space, we're really pushing the bubble at the Dixie Center to fit the banquet space. Just had a meeting today with the board, the Dixie Center board, about potentially trying to squeeze in some kind of an expansion before then. I know that's premature. Just don't go spreading the word on that, but at least there's talk about that because of how big it is. Transportation is going to be different here. We're spread out, and we have two transitions. We have the swim clear out at Sand Hollow and the other transition downtown St. George. So we've got to get people around, and with people from 100 different countries here, that's going to take some communication too. And so that's the other piece of it that I think is important, is coming up with a communication strategy, making sure that all of these internationals can find their way around. And so those are the three kind of key concerns where I think we got to ratchet it up. And so we put together some local organizing committees. I've got groups, different committees for all the different things that we can think about. We'd love to have involvement from, Kurt is on that committee representing the Washington City, but as you spread out in your own, personal circles, we'd love to get involvement where we can of people, because I think it's going to take help from all of us. So we're looking forward to that too, and pulling it all together. The last thing I'll show is just one more video that we put together to just kind of quickly say, hey, this is coming, and we're excited about it. So take a look at this, and I'll entertain questions. Or
something truly magical is happening across the world, beckoning call. It ripples in the waters. It rumbles from Earth's core. It rings from the mountains' tops. Echoes off the rocks. Whispers through canyon walls. You know the feeling. You've experienced it before. You felt it inside. And you long for its return. It's a feeling that transcends time and space. It's woven through the fabric of cultures and civilizations. It is analyzed in legends and repeated in the stories of time. It comes in a moment and lasts for a lifetime. It is profoundly personal, universally shared. It beats in your heart, pumps through your veins, and pierces through the atmosphere. But it doesn't come by chance, and it doesn't come for free. The feeling is bred in sacrifice. It rises with desire, endures in effort, and grows through giving. Look inward, you'll feel it. Look up, you'll see it soar. The feeling is coming, and it wants to be found.
So pretty exciting. A few years ago, we were putting in a bid to host the World Championship, and the first time around, we didn't get it when we put in the bid the first time, but we had a new employee in the office at that point, and we were working on this bid, putting all these materials together, and he said to me, "Man, you're putting a lot of effort into this," and I said, "Well, we've put 8 years of effort into this," and that's how I feel. You know, now it's 10 years, and we won the bid, but that's what this has been. It's been 10 years of community pulling together and putting together a package that Ironman could believe in. And we have the right stuff here. We have the elements that will make it successful. And what we want to do now is just put on a show that will make them say, "Hey, we want to be back again," right? And then we can decide if we want it back again or not. Anyway, any questions that you have? I've got just a couple of things I wanted to just ask. Street banners, we're creating street banners again for this year's race, and then we'll create new ones for next year's race as well for the World Championship. Washington City want to be part of that. We've done that in the past, so we'll get those banners created and get them to you, and we can hang them up. I think they go up along with Cotton Days, typically is when those go up. The breakfast, I was going to ask about that for this year, and it sounds like you're on board with that again, so we'll include that. And then the last thing I've got, Jeff, is for you. We had an interlocal agreement for the first 5 years. I've got a remake of that for this next 5-year agreement. So I can give you a hard copy of that tonight, and then I'll. Yeah. So this one's for the next 5, and it'll include the World Championship language in there as well. Really, we just tried to mimic it off of what we did before, but just put in the adjustments based on the new races and things. So I'll give you a hard copy tonight, and then I'll email you. You know, I think, I mean, we've got a couple months before the race, but it's not urgent from my perspective, because I feel like we've got a pretty good relationship and everybody knows what we're talking about. But I think it would be good to just get that locked in the next month or so if we can. Does that seem reasonable?
Well, always reasonable for the non-attorneys.
Yeah.
So if you can hard cut this break, and then we can email or share the typically done in a
Word doc, so you can redline changes to it. You know, it'll probably be Brian. Do you know Brian? Brian Graff. So with Eric's. Yes. Yeah. So okay, I'll get that to you just before I walk out the door, and then that's kind of all I've got on the.
Kevin, just would you enlighten the council as what it would take to be a major entity? I kind of want to see Washington City's name up there, but kind of want to know what that takes.
Yeah, so St. George has a financial commitment of $50,000 on the World Championship in services, and of course, the Utah Sports Commission is a lot more than that. They're way up there, and then so that's really kind of the level. But I don't think we'd expect that level from you. You're not involved in they've got their name on the race, right? So, but I guess what I would like to see is just that concept of, hey, Washington City's supporting this, and we're going to let's line the street somehow. Let's create a celebration somehow for the World Championship that says we're a part of it. Because what I'd like to see is that those athletes, and you've had this before. I mean, you've got Heather Wortel's trophy sitting in the community center, where they come back here and they recognize this city, this community as one of the key elements in it. And I think we can do that because they're passing through. They're gonna know they're here if the city makes them know they're here, right? Yeah, she trained at the community center and became friends.
Back?
She's retired this year.
Really?
Yep, her and Trevor hung it up this year. Yeah. So we've been kind of dialoguing with them a bit about maybe being ambassadors at some sort, because now they're not in the race. They could be involved in some way that way.
I'll bet they will.
Yeah.
Well, Victoria will be sad. She used to work out with her.
Hmm.
One of the things I really appreciate with your emphasis, and we've been doing in a broad vision for Southern Utah, is expanding the idea of what we are, Greater Zion and everything. If it can't be something that's done during the race, but also just letting them know that, we'd love to have when the triathletes come, watching them work out and stuff in the morning is awe-inspiring. So if they feel more comfortable using facilities and coming around, hospitality for their families. I know we're not trying to get in the way of the race, but to support the race and the
Yep.
families that are coming to support these athletes, we'd really like to open our doors for that. So that's important to us, I think.
We appreciate that. And we can certainly do a lot to spread the word of the facilities that are available, that are open access. And I think that's one of the things we talked to with Dixie State about with is the pool over there and opening that up for access for them to come and train while they're here, before the race even, bring their families and train, use those facilities, but then race week as well. We have some facilities like that too. So yeah, let's brainstorm and keep the ideas going. Get you involved and your name celebrated as much as possible.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you all.
Good to see you. Okay, move on to item 3, discussion review. Item 4, discussion and review of potential purchase of a bison for Veterans Park. I've invited Kelly Charlton to come up and visit with you folks on the council here. She was very instrumental, along a couple of council members, of getting that bison at our Sullivan Park for free, which was nice.
For free.
But, we asked her to just come and tell us what a vision she might have and the cost, and we'll run it to the council. It can be at a later date. I just wanted y'all to see what kind of a price we'd be looking at.
Yeah,
things like
so a
that.
little preliminary. Kelly Charlton, I work for Stapley Pharmacy, and I designed the bison that's now over at Sullivan Park. The mayor and I had a great discussion about the design of that bison, and he suggested that you might be looking to do a bison for perhaps the Veterans Park. So I reached out to a couple of people. First, Dixie State, also to the artist who designed not only our bison, but also the bison that sits in front of Innovation Plaza. So I can give you some nuances of what it takes with Dixie State. Have you already contracted with Dixie State for a bison?
We have not.
Okay, so generally speaking, what I know of that, and that is not something I asked the question about, but generally speaking, it's anywhere from $10,000 to $12,000 to just simply purchase the bison. Dixie State pays their artists, generally speaking, from the college, about $500. And I would highly recommend that you drive around the city, look at the bison, and you will be able to tell the bison that were paid $500, and you will tell the bison that were paid more than that, generally by a private entity. There's a huge difference. And that's not to belittle any of the artists, just that some are better than others. Dixie State has very distinct placement requirements, and this is something you need to know. They don't want it in some obscure place. In fact, they really felt like Sullivan Soccer Park was too obscure. It wasn't on the main road. They wanted, if they had called me back, they would have wanted it on Telegraph. Okay, so because I've already done the whole rollout and it's permanent, they're going to allow it to stay there and not fight me on it. Thank goodness we don't have to engage the mayor in that little fight. Their requirements, however, are that it has to be accessible by car. It has to be able to be seen from the road. And what he really emphasized today was they get the final choice on where it's going. So when and if we decide that you want to move forward with this, we want to give them 2 or 3 locations that you feel would be appropriate. If it's near a parking lot but not near a road, we might be able to sway them, but they really like it to be near a big major road or a thoroughfare. They've actually turned people down because their proposed location is somewhere that they didn't feel was public enough. Okay. Conceptually, we just tossed out some ideas, but here's an idea. So if you're looking at a veterans bison, conceptually what I'm thinking is you could take bombers of some sort, make those bombers go in formation across the top of the bison toward the head and come to an American flag in the front of the bison's head. You could do some kind of promotion through the city where people send a photo of one of their loved ones who is a veteran. They tell you why that person should be on the bison. This particular artist is a portrait artist. So not only can she do anything we ask her to do landscape-wise, but she can also paint portraits on the bison of these people. The concept would be that we would represent all four branches, so Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, and on each side, one of each branch would be located. And then my idea would be to take the logos, the branch logos, watermark those logos and do the entire underside of the belly of the bison with those watermarks so that everyone's represented. If we need to add different branches, such as the Coast Guard, we could certainly do that. But at this point, we had only talked about the four major branches. Cost-wise, we're looking at approximately $3,000 for the artist, and then Dixie College would pay for all of her supplies. The only thing she has requested, she can get it done in about 6 weeks if she works full-time, and the only thing she has requested is an air-conditioned space because she'll do it during the summer. The reason for that is because we are hoping to roll that out if we move forward with this at Veterans Day, during a Veterans Day celebration. So, of course, we want it done before that time frame.
So does she not have a place that she typically does these?
So she lives in Tokerville, but right now she's working on her master's degree in California. So she would come home for the summer, visit with family, but she doesn't have a space that she's rented out her home. So she'd come back to St. George or Tokerville or Hurricane for the summer, but we would just have to find her a small space. It doesn't have to be gigantic. It could be in somebody's back room temporarily. She's very clean. Just put a cloth down on the floor. It's not like it's going to end up on the walls.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
And she will not do acrylic. She will do, no, she'll do acrylic, not oil. The one over, if you've seen the one by Ford, that one was done in oils. It was very expensive. It's about $10,000 just in oil paint. And then it takes 6 months to cure. And then they had to shellac it and keep it indoors for another 2 or 3 months before they could actually place it outside. So we definitely don't want to do that. The next thing you need to know is about the installation cost. And frankly, that is the cheapest thing on the list. It's about $200. So not a big deal. I need to know a couple of things. I need to know who is the primary contact that I should encourage Dixie State to be contacting. And I need to know if there's going to be a bison number 2 because we're going to want to consider buying that ahead of time. So that's all I've got for you. And I can have pictures for you next time if you want. I can have her do a rendering and bring those. And so any questions?
Any questions for Kelly this time?
No, you mentioned bison number 2. You mean purchase another one for a future date?
Yes.
So
So
you would
we
buy
had
it
just,
now and
yeah, we had just had a conversation about what that might look like. Here's the problem. They purchased 30 bison. Dixie State
I've
did.
seen the stack of them down there.
Yeah,
So I'm
the first 20 flew out the door, so they're gone in the first 3 years. They've had a lot of requests for the last 10 bison, and Jordan Sharp told me today that they're turning people down right and left because they don't like where they're going to place them. And so when I spoke with him, his suggestion was if Washington City is thinking they want a second bison, which would actually be the third bison. If you wanted another one, we need to probably lock that in with them so that they know kind of what the concept is. We had briefly discussed what I refer to as the Washington City where Dixie begins bison and putting it over at the park. Is it Nelson Park? Nyson Park next to the water wheel. Because it's very public. So,
Yeah.
And they would love that placement. But that's kind of secondary to this first thing. So just kind of wanted to throw all that out for you.
We appreciate the information. I'm just want to wrap my arms around it and go, okay, this would be a great thing to put in our community, but how much does it cost?
Right. I think you're looking at about 15,000 total.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you could probably negotiate if Dixie's telling you 12,000, I think you could probably negotiate down to 10. Because they'll take any amount of money for the D1 rollout at this point.
Forgot about that. How can I forget about that?
Okay, any other
Yeah,
questions?
quick question, Kelly. Miss Bice with Southern Utah Art Guild, did you have a chance to talk to her? Does this fit within? Because I know that we had had a conversation in context with RAP money where we had already allocated some dollars. Wondering if that might be a fit, because she seemed more concerned with art and supporting artists rather than any specific. I don't know if that makes sense, to loop her in or not. It's just curious if you had a chance to talk to her.
Yeah, I thought I'd throw it out to you guys and then have you give me direction. I'm happy to do whatever you want me to do. This is kind of a side thing for me. So I don't know. There's something that, there's something that comes from putting one of those bison out. It actually becomes personal. And in our case with Stapley Pharmacy, how the timing was that we lost Brad and the bison was rolled out right before that happened, and it kind of became a memorial. So I really feel like if you're moving forward with a veterans bison, there could be some real public movement, and I think the public would really like that. So no cost to me. I don't win or lose anything if you do this. I just wanted to give you my information and hope that you can do with it what you please. Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're
Kelly.
welcome. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. It's good to see you again. Just wanted you council members to think about that, and we may or may not need to move pretty quickly if we wanted to do it for Veterans Day.
I think one of the main things that hits my mind is we have such unique change happening to our community, talking about some new parks coming in. We're a growing community, and I love the concept of talking about 3D art and its impact to celebrating our heritage and our relationship with things. I welcome the conversation about the 3D bison, putting them out there, but I think there's more to be talked about. I really want to see us look and see where these things need to happen. We've got a brand new Main Street happening. I really like the concept of art, of really solidifying who we are as our identity. So I look forward to talking about this and other things that come before the council about our 3D art concepts. I really look forward to that.
Thank you. We'll move on. Item 3, discussion and review of short-term vacation rentals management requirements. Drew Ellerman.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to bring this before you. We had this discussion, I think, had Elaine Porter from Town Center in Coral Canyon addressed you a couple weeks back with some of the concerns they've had. And so we kind of put this then on our joint meeting, as you remember, on the 29th of January, and I've moved it through just not to help so much them, probably to help us as a city and staff more than anybody. So just to let you know, the Planning Commission held their public hearing. We did our advertising. Planning Commission held their public hearing last Wednesday. They unanimously recommended approval of this ordinance, but I wanted to bring it to you, the gentlemen, tonight, and just so you can kind of digest a little bit. You'll have it on your city council meeting 2 weeks from tonight, and for that public hearing and for vote on that. So, but I just wanted to quickly, if you had a chance, hopefully, to read this. It currently reads we're only changing F in this 9-8F-8, which is the section for residential short-term developments, and that's in the PUD ordinance of Washington City. And F currently reads a single property management overseer that would be required for a residential short-term rental development. Projects with more than 40 units will require that a property management overseer will have a representative living on the site. And because we had the issues with all of them, the concern about that one property thing, that's what has stirred everything, that people feel like we've taken away their freedoms, we've monopolized, we've heard it all. And we can see a little bit of validity in what they're saying and some of the struggles they've had, especially when you get a bad property management is over the whole project. They've got to start fresh, basically everybody in there does. This still will allow them to have their freedom to pick whoever they want to advertise their unit. But what we're wanting to do after speaking with, especially our business licensing, Tara, Denise, and I have kind of whittled down the 3 biggest things we found that we want to make sure are covered are these that we're addressing. So if I may, we're proposing this language that the homeowners association or their designee for each short-term rental development will be responsible for providing to the city a single point of contact that resides either on the property or within a 20 minutes of the development that will be directly responsible for, and here's the 3 items: any and all circumstances and or disturbances that may need addressing due to the property owners or their guest. Number 2, assuring that all units being used as a short-term rental have a current Washington City business license. And 3rd, assuring that all units being used as short-term rentals will be scheduled for and pass a Washington City Fire Department yearly inspection for the unit being used as a short-term rental. Those are the 3 that we felt were the most important to be in there. And so we're going to let that HOA, just to let you know what's happened, and 2 of them now have hired a professional HOA company. We'd love it if they all did that, because both of them have said, that's exactly what we'll take care of for you, city. So the town center and the 8th in Coral Canyon are going to be under a company called FCS. And then Vita Sol is another one just off of the Parkway that they're going to be managed by Paul Properties. And they both told us they have no problem addressing these things. So the reason I put in there or their designee was because you may have some of these developments that don't have a professional HOA. So we're going to still have it run through the homeowners association, and then they can designate if they want to pick one of the companies just to be that point of contact for us. It's going to address these things, and they'll make that up with them. They're going to have to agree. Whoever they pick, we don't care, is they're just going to tell us who it is. And then they can let their residents pick whoever they want, like they do with the landscaper or the cleaning company or any of those other things that they, and some of them have different, especially cleaning companies, people who have their own, may hire whoever they want to hire. Because believe it or not, that's one of the most important things for these, I've found out with these vacation rentals, is how well they're cleaned after the tenants now. And that's become a very, very hot topic. And so the really good ones are being sought after. And so we just feel we'll let them pick whoever they want to advertise, as I like to say, their product out there on whatever website that they use. So that we feel this covers everything for us. But I'll be glad to have any discussions that you would like.
What is compliance like right now, Drew, and people that are certified with their licenses to do a short-term rental?
What's the question again? I'm sorry, I didn't get the first
I'm just
part.
curious about how people are complying with our short-term rental agreement as it is. Are people complying, or is this?
They generally, I'm not going to say 100% because I don't think I can comfortably say that, but the ones that we have had that tag on since have really done all their best to do that. It's just you get the rogue homeowner that will even sometimes come in and fill out an application and say they're using this particular company that was chosen, and they only did it in paper form. What's actually happening in their unit and everything else is they've turned it over to somebody else.
So is there any
We know of
consequence
one
for
or
that?
two. Well, as of right now, we don't, other than, and we, we're probably going to have to evolve into some consequences with all of this. Even now, I've come up with some ideas, but we won't talk about them tonight. It's a topic for a different work session of what we can do if we end up with, and they haven't been serious. That's why I'm not really, come to you saying, hey, we really need to do something. You're always going to get the rogue people who are the mavericks out there that, but for the most part, they've really tried to comply with it.
Now, when you say they've tried to comply with it, I'm trying to get an idea before we try to do any alterations of the code that exists. Do we have an idea with how well people have been complying with it because I've heard different people and different points of view of the frustrations of trying to get people to say, oh yeah, we've got this, we've got it, we don't. I'm getting a feeling, as I've talked about it, that there hasn't really been compliance yet as an overall, I don't want to say if the city's the proper way of saying it, but those participating within this enterprise haven't felt a huge compliance with the requisites that have been put by the council in the past.
Well, my best example to use is Town Center at Coral Canyon. And I'm going to say, to be honest with you, they have, for the most part, really, really tried. I know of 2 rogue owners. It wasn't so much the development. It was these 2 divisions. I'm not going to say any names, of course, but there was these 2 that were probably just really obnoxiously, against it. But the rest of them really did make the attempt there, and for the most part, Vita Sol really made that attempt, but they didn't sell as fast as Town Center did. And they really did try to follow that. They just started getting, as more owners come, again, it's like when you add one more opinion to the pile, and then they all get fed on this, boo against the city for forcing this monopoly on us, and all that. And I will be honest, the real estate personnel didn't help that matter. If there was the problem child that started it all, it would probably be, and I will be a little harsh because it is what it is. They were the ones that put up and told the people that were buying, oh, the city's forcing you to do, and and didn't explain to them why we were doing it. And so that just started the bad wheel of spinning. But
I'm just trying to continue a conversation. Some people are coming new into it. I really feel like where we kind of left on this last time was just making sure I feel like people are following along with this. One of the big arguments was the ability for funding for these second homes. Big issue is having that flexibility and ability to choose different, dare I say, caretaker for the home while they're gone. One thing that, as much as I appreciate the direction this is going, one thing that gets me is, so what if they don't? So if they don't want to do it? Because I see the added burden that's given to our employees, and also just the fact that they're not complying with basic licensing and things that should be followed in a city setting.
well, most of them are getting a license. I mean, that hasn't been so much the problem, I don't think. I mean, for the most part, there's still a few that don't.
Correct.
If you do it this way, they're required to go to their HOA regardless. They have to pay their HOA dues. So if they're using their HOA as the designated person, their HOA holds all the cards anyway, right? They don't have to worry about the property management company. We're holding their HOA responsible for collecting that for them. They have, if you go to an HOA and sign up to get your pool card, there should be.
There's that
they
fee.
have to sign up for their business license.
So now all things go through the HOA.
Yeah, so for
Right.
us, and kind of to answer your question, this is incremental policy making at its best.
Right.
Okay?
That's what I'm thinking.
So this is a new venture for us. I think that what we've realized, every time we have problems, well, most often when we have problems with code compliance, the very first thing we look at is the code understandable? Does it work? Is it functional? The intent of the direction originally given was good, and we think we've maintained that intent, and that is a single point of contact. That was our intent, but we also recognized, and again, not as much an issue with the city, but how the information was distributed out there, whether intentionally or not, it became a problem for these individuals in this, and then ultimately it fell on the recorder's office with the licensing. So I think we feel pretty comfortable again because we're maintaining the original intent, which is single point contact, and allowing then the homeowners, the property owners, to be able to have some flexibility that has been problematic for them. All that we're hoping will help the recorder's office. And then ultimately with respect to penalties, again, I'll call this incremental policy making at its best. We will, as always, have individuals who just purposely ignore. And that probably is our next step, is to kind of identify penalties for those.
And it'll probably go through the business license or revocation of.
Right, because I really feel like after seeing some unique scenarios that have been brought up in the past, I don't know if a financial penalty is a good one, but their ability to operate as a business may be in question, because it's that important to be good neighbors wherever these happen to be. That I understand there is a 40 resident sort of language in this.
That was the old one.
The old one.
The current one, I'm sorry.
So that was
It's
part
not
of my
old yet.
question. So that's going away.
You're just saying all vacation.
We're just saying all of these will fall under this.
So if
we're
it has
not-
an HOA,
Yeah, we're just going to say, and they can
Whatever
either.
the HOA size is, it goes through that HOA.
Right, because the good thing is if it's an HOA, that most of the people that are on the board are living there anyway, so that takes care of the one criteria. But if they hired a professional company, they've got the people that are there mostly during the day taking care of everything anyway, so we'll just have to worry about them being within 20 minutes. I like the 20-minute rule. That just says,
see,
you know.
I don't like that part. I think we should just be in Washington County. Because what if a guy lives in Ivins and he runs his business out of Ivins, but he's a good property manager? Why should we exclude him if they're in Washington County?
It's not so much exclusion. I think it's just operating. We're diversifying from what it was. And I think that's a big thing to
You're looking
recognize.
for response time, I think is
No,
what.
no, and I get that, but my opinion is, and you can narrow it down to the adjacent cities. I just think why are we hurting the guy who owns a business in Santa Clara? I mean, granted, we wish he was in Washington, but he's not. But I think that we shouldn't narrow it down to just 20 minutes because that's pretty. Are we going to add
I
in
think a fair
traffic now
question
and
on
say,
that
well,
is
traffic
how
is bad,
far
so he's
can you
cut
go
off?
in from our place? 20 minutes.
And is
No, I
this
mean,
at
what I'm
5
saying-
o'clock in the afternoon?
What I want to say
or
is, from
just-
my point of view, is I have some travels, which I do a lot within the different cities. I do some stuff in Hurricane. I do some stuff.
It's 20
out
to
in-
30 minutes. I'll agree.
And that's the thing is, what would we be excluding if we were at 20 minutes from your point of view? Because I can see Santa Clara still working. I can see St. George still working. I can see Hurricane still working.
I'm just saying 20 just seems, it's kind of language that I look like that's kind of loose.
Well,
is all
I
I'm
guess-
saying. And I would say to the surrounding
What would it say?
cities.
How about 20 miles? I think that covers. Isn't Ivins within 20 miles of here? I'm just.
could see that
So that's all I'm
conversation.
saying is just, I'm not saying let's go to clear east of Washington County I'm saying these areas. I'm just saying the language seems loose to me.
I do
and it's just-
appreciate
And
that.
it's just kind of like, that's
I
how
think
I look at it.
what you're saying about this and what was jokingly said about one of our intersections makes more sense. I do like the idea of the mileage over the minutes. Mileage makes more sense
If
to
I
me.
can put a bubble, yeah, they can
Yeah, that's-
pinpoint where
that's
they are
fine.
and they
That's
can,
fine. That makes
you can
more
draw the
sense.
bubble and you're either in or you're not. And so.
I think that makes sense. That would work.
So that
You really start to drill down, the minute idea is almost unenforceable from the house, because it could be 20 minutes, a block away, depending on which to look at. I do like, just from if we want to ever actually enforce that aspect of it, it'd be much easier for us to enforce it if it were a delineation of either within X area or mileage from it. It's much easier to enforce if we approach the enforcement part. Otherwise, the other would be hard to enforce.
Yeah, what I was just trying to do the
said-
minutes is
Yeah.
because it sends a message of we want promptness.
I think that we should say within a set mileage, and
Yeah.
maybe if there's an intention that things must be addressed within a time frame, that might be worth considering. But if you say, well, instead of 20 minutes and 20 miles, maybe it's 10 miles or whatever. But it goes back to the conversation that Councilman Coates brought up. I'd be interested to see if we could figure out where are we at currently with these different property management companies, and what is a reasonable bubble to conclude for the services needed for our city. I think that'd be a worthwhile thing to just know. I don't want to underestimate something, but also I think the biggest thing that was the foundational argument was getting people there promptly in the point of a need, which I think is valid.
And just to let the
other
council
point,
know-
though, with this is that you're asking them to be responding to disturbances. It may be more important, or at least equally as important, that they are manning a 24-hour phone.
And yeah, I
Well,
like
that-
that. Because I guess what I'm looking at is I agree with you on the fact that maybe it's not where their business is set up, it's how fast they can get someone there. But
Yeah, because they may have an
can someone
employee that
close.
lives in Washington that they're going to send over. I mean, that's the whole, we don't know all those things. And again, I don't want to know if we want to get so drilled down on that specific. I mean, we just put a parameter out there. I'm not going to go out there and drive from the thing and, because is it 20 miles by the crow flies? Is it 20 miles by the, I don't know if we want to get that. We're just wanting to let them know there's a sense of responsibility and a closeness of time and location. And I think that'll be the sand, we don't want to, again, the line through the sand and be too
But no, I
drilled
think
down.
this is, I'm okay with compromising and trying something else out. I feel like my biggest concern is this looks like it will address a lot of the issues that were discovered by staff as we tried the first policy, the incremental policy making at its finest, as our city manager said it. I really appreciate the feedback because obviously there needs to be some adjustments. I still think and feel that we need to move into the concept of a mileage because it's easier to expand who's going to come into this bubble, because this is a significant change from the previous council, what we were going for. But is there something that needs to put in there with wording of haste? I think might be worth give us some ideas of how we can make sure that's enforced in this change.
I appreciate that. And that's what I think I'll tweak that and put that into a miles thing, and then we'll go from there. Again, I really just appreciate the fact that we've chosen that it's the homeowners association that's going to be basically the ones who are they're going to decide as a collective group, like that we have let them before, but now they have that freedom, but they're going to have, someone has to pick they will have to put some responsibility, not every single bit of it. Then they can let their people use who they'd like, and they get that freedom.
Mayor, if I might jump in the conversation, I like what Councilman Coate said with the Washington County. I think that any property manager or business owner will be reasonable in their responding to any issues there. So as you're looking at it, that would be something I would consider.
Yep. Because again, I was just trying to eliminate someone, because what ends up happening is, you have Jim and Jane Doe that live up in Salt Lake, Enterprise, or let's say Logan, because I got quite a few people that live there or in Ogden or whatever that have homes here, and they want to be, they're going to advertise it themselves. They're going to take everything. But I told them, if I have a problem, that doesn't work, because you cannot make it from Ogden down here in a reasonable amount of time to take care of a problem for me.
So I think that
But when
goes
you're
to
talking about FCS or Paul Properties or any of those reputable property management companies,
Mhm.
they're used to this. I mean, they
Yes.
deal with this stuff all the time.
They're a
Those-
24/7
those
company
particular are
anyway.
in St. George.
Right.
But I think we're really kind of splitting hairs on 20 minutes, 20 miles. And so honestly, if they're local, and I think Washington County sounds local, I'm okay with that.
I don't know. I think the first splitting here was one company. That's a huge selection where it's like one. Having this is, I think, a first step of comfort. I like how staff has recommended at least some sort of a parameter. I still think there are enough places far away where you are in the enterprise and the other and stuff, not to negate what they can do, but to provide the needs necessary with their enterprise. I think it's important for them to be proximal, close enough to address a need. And so I'm still leaning towards having some sort of a mileage as a start. And if it's get some more staff feedback, this has been in operation for how many years now, the existing?
Not very far, maybe. Yeah.
I want to say we're 1-2 years.
It's
in
2 at the
operation.
most, probably a year and a half at this specific,
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
that's
that
the
we
thing,
went to
can
that.
revise
So
this and see if we want to go into the whole county. But I think this is a great step into expanding and trying and seeing how that went. Proximity, I think, is the first reasonable thing to ensure outside of going from one company is ensuring proximity.
And I appreciate the feedback. So don't be offended if you see this in 2 weeks, I'm going to leave the language just like it is, because it sounds like you have some varying opinions. I won't change that. We'll let you, when you make your.
I will add this though, Councilman Cluff, it's really important. I can support 20 miles. Okay. I'm just saying that generally speaking, I lean more towards free enterprise.
And I support 20 miles too, but I personally think Washington County works. But that's just, like I said, we could start somewhere.
And here's my 2 cents. I just don't want to be exclusionary. I think that's important too, is I think the most property management companies are, their reputation is the basis for their business. And not only, I think that the mileage is fine, because that shows that we want a response within a certain amount of time, because there's some urgency to it. But I also would hate to ever appear to anyone in our area that we're excluding anyone. But I'm sure anyway, thank you.
Can you just highlight that, Drew? Well, next time it comes out, just highlight that.
Yeah, I'm going to put that particular sentence, the or within, and I'll put it in red. Is that what you meant by
Yeah,
high?
just so it
So it
pops
stands,
out at us
pops
when we
out at
go
you.
read it
I think
again.
you'll remember.
Well, we will.
So I'll remind, but I'll put that in red, that particular. Any other, like I said, I don't want to spend too much, but this is kind of what we talked about, our joint. And I dropped that other stuff that sounded confusing, if you remember. And I just kind of thought, hey, why don't we just tuck this in here? And it all worked out. So I really like the way it's going.
The only thing I would request is we start looking at some ramifications of not being compliant in the fact of if they are being a nuisance, and then we have potential. I thought we had a way to pull their business license already in the ordinance, and I don't.
We do. It's
Always that.
So I'm just wondering if we need to have that in our language, that
Revocation process on business license.
we've had this problem, we've had multiple infractions or whatever it is. I'm not saying we have to do that now. I just think we should start thinking about that.
And I want to, yeah, what I'd like to do is probably have a policy on how we do that, and maybe not so much code wise. We can have a policy, what's going to drive it to then, because a revocation has to come before you gentlemen. That's how code reads it, that Yeah.
due process.
They can stand here and talk to, and
I think what I'm asking is that we have to start working toward that we have the policy in place. So
That's
it's
right.
not just, we need
Yeah.
to do that.
So-
I'm just saying we should start working toward that in the next while.
Yeah, and I
And
think
some-
what we'd want to do with that again, because business licenses are so regulated under state statute as well, and the due process portion, I think ultimately we still will bring it back to a penalty portion
So maybe
instead
one
of
thing,
the other, because it could be a nightmare.
so if it's not revocation, right? Well, maybe if it's when they renew it, if there are so many complaints or things, the renewal process changes based off of complaints or something.
Again, what we'll have to do is just see if we have that ability under the state statute. And that's typically why you'll steer away from the business license issue, because that's, again, a commerce issue and it falls under the free commerce issue. That's why you end up usually with penalties. But we'll look into that to see what.
yeah, because we may be able to, looking into it, say after so many penalties, we can then take them to a,
Due process. Here's the thing. Penalties for vacation rental, this isn't a new subject because cities across, Reno has been dealing with this for 20 years now. They come down to a very particular, one violation, heavy penalty, second, heavier. And it's
Progressive,
done a lot to
yeah.
correct itself because of penalties. Due process tends to not reimburse the city for the expense it takes to even go through that process, but the time it involves is just, business license revocation almost doesn't fit the purpose you want, which is bringing people into compliance. So I think we have a lot of things we can look at and options already that aren't new.
I like the heavy penalty if the city wants to go that, because sometimes we've been not a city that wants to hit heavy penalties on it, but this is one of those, it's a new animal. It's a unique thing that doesn't fall into regular commerce. I mean, it is, but it isn't in my.
One of my hopes is if we can introduce something that people want to follow, we can provide a service that's valuable to our community and it works, right? It works, those flow, to see how it can be expanded in our community in the right setting.
Yeah.
And so for me, we've been focusing very specific zones. I get a lot of requests from people to say, well, I'm a very responsible person. I have the setting and everything else. I'm open to expanding this and see how it works for a while and see where else we can make this work.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. We'll move on. Last item, discussion and review of the name for the Canyon Park and Trailhead and the cost to make the change. Barry?
Hello, Council.
Excuse me, Leisure Services Director Barry Blake.
Thank you. I was given the assignment a couple weeks ago to inquire on what the cost would be to do the work on the rock there to make the change. I visited with Robert Kenworthy, who did this work, and the cost would be $1,500 to sandblast that line, the whole trailhead, and then to replace it with trailhead. And he also wanted me to know that there's no guarantee that you can't see some of the stuff still there that was there before, because that's a pretty tough job, he said, to do. And you're also going to see, because you have to sandblast the whole thing, and so that rock's going to look different there.
So Barry and I talked about this because I don't think we want it to look lousy either. So we talked about the replacement. I think it was about $2,300 to $2,500 to do a new one, that not including securing and finding the rock and removing and replacing, which we know will be a pretty big crane. Right.
If possible. I don't know. I'm sure it is. They
So,
make lots of stuff.
but with that
Anything's
price,
possible.
That's right.
It just costs money. So are we looking at if we were to do the whole thing, the whole face, would be $2,300 to $2,500 plus installation, plus craning, plus rock. So there's a
and I don't know what
significant
those
number.
are. We would probably have about $100 to, I better throw that in just for some of your other signage.
Are there any other costs
But
that
they're
you're
not
aware of?
significant.
Leisure Services Director, that you're aware of?
That's the only cost as far as that, sandblasting off and doing it.
What
And
about like stuff we've already put it on, or changing websites, that kind of cost?
Well, I mean,
One of my concerns is
well,
the Sienna Hills development. There's development agreements. There is regional.
well, sure, all that we can't change. I mean, the hellhole is BLM. I mean, I have an easement through Hellhole, but we don't own that. And it's on all the map. I mean, city's not going to change that. I mean, that's the way it's always been. So, I mean, you're not going to change that. You can change what you call the park. And really, that's the reason why we called it Canyon Park. We gave them the option to call it what they want. We discussed that as a staff, and that's one of the reasons why. You know, if they want to call it Canyon Park, they can call it Canyon Park. If they're offended with Hellhole, they don't have to call it Hell. They can call it Canyon Park, and it's there. So
Who are we referring to?
The public, right?
Well, anybody
He's just
that
saying
goes
people can
there.
choose how
Yeah.
you want to call it, Canyon Park, or you could call it Hellhole Trailhead, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is a good point, though, that you made up. The trail itself is an easement through BLM. BLM has that name, so that's.
It's on all the county, it's on every map there is.
I don't think with respect to the other items, I don't know if there's really a substantial cost on the other items from the websites to those type of things, and I can't think of anything else. Like I said, throw in another $100 for some signage.
Well, you know, the other thing with the cost, I was just curious with how we interrelate with other people who operate with the existing name of the entity. Regardless of what we change it will remain as whatever it is in these other entities. And I think that's important to outline is it's going to stay there regardless if we say it's going to be Tooth Fairy Lane or whatever. It'll stay Hellhole according to those entities. They have no reason to change those and they will stay the same.
It's been that way for 100 years. Us.
Barry, can I talk to just the rock? And I just want to reference, you're talking about changing it. All you're going to do when you sandblast is you're going to take, you can take it down to the lettering and then take off what's called desert varnish. When you get down to the pure, it's chinner up sandstone, then you're going to have a clean surface. I don't think replacing that rock, no matter what we decide, is even a feasible discussion or option. We can make that work.
You don't think you can, or you can?
No, you can. You can sandblast it down to a clean surface. The reason that you see the irregularities in the face of it, like you get that light finish, that's a varnish. A lot of people call it desert varnish, but what it is just impurities on the rock. But you can blast it down to a clean surface, and then you'll be able to put etch whatever you want.
So let me ask you this, just because I don't know, when you etch that, and this is toward Barry as well, are you talking to sandblast the whole thing down so it's an even, smooth surface and then reblast all the words, or you're just talking?
No, this is just the line.
Just the
so
line.
the Hellhole Trailhead, that's just to take that line, sandblast that out,
That
and
would look
replace it
different.
with Trailhead.
So
That would look different.
There'd be a different elevation.
And that's what he said. He just basically said, you know, well, I can do that, but you're going to have, I mean, it's going to.
Because what you're doing is you're
it's
removing.
when you erase something off something, then you write it in, you're going to, I mean, there's going to be some kind of a trace. You're going to see
Please put that
something.
on the overhead, how it looks right now again.
I think we'll be careful too. I mean, we have a geologist also on the council. We'll be careful from staff because all we're doing is forwarding what Kenworthy had indicated to us. So I'm not even.
Might be listening to this, that maybe removing that rock was going to be an option.
Rotate it.
I don't think it needs to be removed at all. I think that whatever the council decides can be put on there in a nice clean format.
Line right here.
Let's see if, Councilman, not to be particular about what you're saying, isn't desert varnish a microorganism?
No, it's a chemical reaction with the rock itself, the calcium carbonate that's in it creates different reactions depending on what it is. But anyway, this is getting into geology stuff. It can be cleaned up.
Unique?
Hi, Barry. I'm right here, by the way. How are you? I went by the park and the trailhead this afternoon, and it was a full parking lot, and there were kids playing, and it's a beautiful park. In fact, there were two moms sitting at the bottom with their lawn chairs watching their kids slide down, and they said, we really like these slides because our older kids can use them and have fun with them too.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of struck up a conversation, and I said, so where are you from? And one lady was a local. She's from here in Washington. Another one was visiting. And so she said, hey, let's go out to the park. And they were having a great time. I asked them, I said, do you know what the name of the park is? And they said, yeah, it's Canyon Park. And I said, well, what do you think about it? I said, did you know it's also a trailhead? And they said, yeah, we knew it was a I keep saying hell tread instead of trailhead.
I think there's
I'm
something.
Hellhole Trailhead.
Something keeps coming to the surface.
Anyway, they made an interesting observation. And I think sometimes moms do. They said, we're not as concerned with the name as we are concerned with where this trail goes and how far it goes. They said, we have 2 of our kids that have ran down this trail. We have no idea where it goes. And so that ended up bringing up in a conversation. Would you mind switching it back to my iPad?
When you're thing.
Yeah, mirroring on the screens. So I said, that's a great point. I said, Hellhole Trailhead, I've run it many times. It's a length of about 4/10 of a mile. I said, and you get about 1/10 of a mile down a real steep incline. And as you can see, I'm going to just kind of pinch into this real quick. There's a beautiful cottonwood wash trail.
It goes up the other way.
Yeah, it goes back up the other, I'll pan out a little bit here, but it goes back up the other canyon. And it's a beautiful, much longer trail. It's also named after what it was. I mean, that's Cottonwood Wash, just like this is Hell Hole or Hell's Hole or Hell Canyon. So I found that interesting. So that's about 1/10 of a mile down where it verges off to a much longer trail in Cottonwood Wash. And then you go down 4/10 of a mile. And the Hellhole Trail actually dead ends into the Virgin River Trail. And the Virgin River Trail is the one that goes all the way from St. George. And with our connections, it go all the way out towards Purgatory, which is another really cool trail. So they wanted to know, how far do these trails go and where do they go? And I said, you know what's awesome is from Canyon Park, you're about 1.5 miles down to Sullivan Park. And they're like, oh, our kids are probably already there. And I said, you're going to go across a really cool boardwalk. And I said, Sullivan Park is amazing. Mm-hmm. And I said, and if you go the other way, if you go upstream Virgin River, years down the road, there's a subdivision that's planned at a later phase, but there's also a park that would be right there off of, I'm looking for the name of the road, Country Way, and that back road to the dump. But that's kind of 3 or 4 years out. But I think as we're talking Canyon Park and we're talking Hellhole Trailhead, I realized that it probably makes sense to keep the trail called Hellhole Trailhead. And I realized that this particular plat has dual purpose. One of the purpose is for a park, and it's an awesome park. And the other purpose is for a trailhead, and it's named after the trail that ends right there, albeit a very short trail, but it's really a connection to other trails and other parks within the city. So it's really pretty cool. The issue that I'm trying to reconcile in my head is, how do we separate the names, recognizing that this is the place where both of these things are, and how do we do it the right way? I've had a good conversation with Councilman Clough and a few others, and we've got some ideas. And I think if we do it right, I think we're going to be able to be very sensitive to the historic nature of the area, but also to those who live there or frequent there and don't really like the name directly associated with a park. I might let somebody else jump in on what some of those ideas are.
I appreciate that. I had a good conversation with many people who've been here for a long time. I've driven by the park. I walked through it again too. And as I was talking to some, especially my neighbors, they sent me some beautiful emails with their concerns. There's a part of me that says, I appreciate the concept that we're looking for ways to really represent our city. I'm fully mindful of our heritage. I love our heritage. I love as Councilman Turk used to say it, the hokey about us sometimes. I find it fascinating that a large of the religious community that was founded here will allow something like that to be named. It wasn't forced upon the community at that time. It was named by that community. And I find it interesting that people who probably see this religious community that's a prominent part of our citizenry as closed-minded to name such a trail like that would be more of an inroad than an outroad of communication and recognition of our unique heritage. As I talk to people, the number one concern was there are so many things that are unique that probably come off inappropriate in our community due to geographic landmarks near hurricane that's been brought up unique, to possible misunderstandings of if this road is about a retention of water or another direction of where you could go. We have some unique things about the wording. What I don't think needs to change in our conversation after hearing out where you've gone, Councilman Staley, and where other people have brought this, I see no reason to change the plat from Sienna Hills, where it has the Canyon Park and Hellhole Trail. How we present the signage, I could be up for conversation, but I think it needs to keep Hellhole Trail where it's at. I think we keep Canyon Park. I think that's fine. And just keep the plat as it is. There's so many working parties, both within the BLM, developers, people who live there, people who love it for what it is. We'll always have people concerned about what we say. We usually reserve that to football and boxing matches, but we have it on one of our park trailheads. I like the idea of introducing our trailheads, doing a nice thing, say welcome to our trailheads, and increasing the concept of our history. I would love to see that. Outside of changing what is already there, I still have reservations of the concept of should we remove it from the front? I'd like to hear the rest of the council if they feel like they should remove the signage from the front of that park. If no matter what we do, it will still exist in the BLM, in the maps in the county, in the plats, and we're already proposing on keeping Hellhole there. Is it really worth the money to remove Hellhole at the front of the park when we are going to have an introduction on the backside of it that's still going to be Hellhole?
So I wanted to jump in on this, and I'm leaning toward the fact that if we didn't name it Hellhole when we started, then I wouldn't have a problem. My biggest concern is that it went through the process, went through staff, and if we need to change that process, that's something different. But it went through the process and was the right way, and it was named, and it had two meanings. One, we have a park and a trailhead, and it accomplished two things. And I think when you talk about signage, I kind of think we need some wayfinding signs, if we, thinking about it, on our trail system, because we have more trails. So we need some wayfinding signs and maybe a map saying, hey, you're here.
Right.
Sullivan's down the way. It's right there. And some wayfinding signs will help do that. But maybe we have a plaque that also explains the history of the Hellhole Trail. And it is short, but I mean, Chris, Councilman Staley, you've ran up that. I'm sorry, I'm getting used to this council thing. We both ran up that trail. It is really hard to get up that trail.
We could think of some other choice words for it too, couldn't we?
I've had them too on that trail, and that's what I love about it. And I've talked to a lot of people as well. I'm in the running community, and all of them. That's how it's referred to. It's all referred to as that. That's how we notify it. And that was how it was before it was even Canyon Park. I like the discussion of the fact that, hey, people can call it Canyon Park or they can call it this. Let me give you an example. So I almost said Confluence Park by the Dixie Center. For years, I called it Dixie Center Park because it was the closest landmark. And so that's how I associated with it. But everyone's like, where are you talking? I'm like, right next to the Dixie Center. And they find, Confluence. And it kind of just, so now to me, it's Dixie Center Park and Confluence Park, and that's where we show up to go run or whatever. So it's these trademarks that happen. But my biggest thing I want to say is that I feel like it didn't matter until we went through the process, and I don't like spending money twice. It was spent once, it went through the process. It does have historical. It's not like it was just thrown out there. And it works with the thing. And so I am in favor of leaving it for that aspect.
Can we talk just a little bit to the history of it?
Yeah, and I admit, so before I finish, I
didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you didn't cut me off, but you made me think of something. I don't know the history besides being called Hellhole, and I understand why it was called that.
Yeah.
So, but I always go back to the story of Dogtown that Councilman Ivy brings up. For years, it was called Dogtown, and I'm like, oh, they just didn't like us, and we're in the dogs, and we're dumpy. And that's what I thought it meant for years until he explained the history behind it all. And it made me like sit and think, holy cow, that's a cool story. And I look at that as it's a cool story of them. I mean, from what I've heard is that people would take water down that hell of a hole to get up to the community. Now, if I'm wrong, I don't know that history.
So that's what's kind of unconfirmed. I've actually been trying to figure that out. So I called past mayor Terrell Clove, and I asked him, I said, is this a pioneer name that they came up? And he said no. And then he told me the same thing that I heard from George Staley with the Historical Society. And he said, he's told me first, he said, there are a few people older than me that you might be able to verify if it's a pioneer name. He said, I remember it as a dump, and we would back our trucks and we would dump, and Terrell Clove said the same thing. We would throw the things out of our truck, and it was so steep and so rugged that we called it Hellhole or Hell's Hole. And he said, frankly, I like it. I said, okay, great.
I don't know what the history is. I just know that's what it's always
So
been.
that's, so specifically to a trail being there, and Barry would be able to tell us exactly, but I'm guessing about 10 years ago when that asphalt trail was put in there, you could correct me, I'm just estimating.
It's 10 or 12 years ago
Yeah,
when that
it's
was
been-
paved.
Yeah.
That it was paved and
Yeah, there was a little
Just kind of-
walkable
yeah,
dirt trail
just-
that you go all the way down through there, and people ride horses and walk down in there. And yeah, there was accessible, but it wasn't paved.
And
like
so
that.
from that point forward, I know that it had gained popularity being called, Hellhole. And then somewhere along the line, it became Hellhole Trailhead. I think in part because Sitla had part of the land and there was an easement and people wanted to know where the trailhead was. So there's actually a fair amount of signage for such a short trail. I mean, we've got this big brown 6x6.
But that is the trail. I mean, you come off that trailhead, and that's the trail you're on. Yeah,
No,
you go into other trails, but that's
so
the trail you're on.
I'm not arguing that at all. I'm just saying in terms of signage, we have this large, probably 6x6 brown, two-sided Hellhole Trailhead right off of Washington Parkway and Telegraph. Really big sign. And then you come to the park and there's the boulder with the Canyon Park and Hellhole Trailhead. So you have plenty of signage for it. I guess what I'm wondering because I'm hearing what you're saying, Councilman Coates and Councilman Clough. I guess what I'm saying is while there is one piece of property, one plat that has dual purpose, I'm wondering if we might more appropriately separate the signs to have that boulder say Canyon Park for those who come and want to see it as a park. And then along the side of the asphalt path down, we put more of a wayfinding sign where it says Hellhole Trailhead, Hellhole Trail, Cottonwood Wash Trail, and Virgin River Trail with like the two moms sitting there with distances and destinations, realizing that I can get to Sullivan Park. I can go up this really cool Cottonwood Wash Trail. And so in this way, we're not shying away from our history. We're embracing our history. We're also being sensitive to, what some people, I've had people reach out to me that say, I really like the idea of changing it. And honestly, I can totally see both sides of this. So I'm saying if we have one piece of ground that is dual purpose, maybe we separate the signage. And I know that costs a little bit more, but I think that would be a fair compromise in this particular case. But honestly, I trust this council. And
Councilman, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
That is, what would you anticipate as an identifying marker for those who are trying to get to the trailhead off of, and that's the reason that original sign off of Telegraph came in. So how would you identify then?
So that's a really good question.
Let me jump in on that signage. It was a signage for the time before the park was
Before the
park.
Right.
And it got put back in after it was mass graded. Doesn't mean that sign's staying there forever. It's been there. And I'm not saying it's going away either. I'm just saying it was put in for that location.
No, my point was though, is one of the reasons we put that in originally is because people said, where is the trail?
So I want to answer your question. So I'm going to go back to the two moms, right? And a very crowded, very busy park on a spring day. The other thing they said is it would be great to have shade when it's 105 and not 65. But I said, how did you find the park? And they find it like everybody finds it, Google Maps. They said we Googled Canyon Park and we found it no problem. So I personally think the brown sign on Telegraph is a little bit of overkill. I think it's too much. I think people can find it. And, I'm going to follow, trust what this council decides. But personally, I think we can do better by separating the signage for Canyon Park and the signage for Hellhole Trailhead and incorporating the other trails and connections and destinations and distances associated with that. That would be my recommendation.
With that, it's 6 o'clock. So
Question
Go
for
ahead.
Barry. I just want to clarify. Our suggestion that we're talking about here is basically just sandblasting the one section and dropping the grade level or just indenting that part.
So
That's our solution that we've come up with.
Well, yeah. So
Or replace the whole thing.
yeah. So the responsibility for staff was to come back with the cost.
Well, I just want to be clear
That's
that
what I was
I'm
asking.
understanding what it would
That's
just,
just our cost that we got from Kenworthy was sandblasting that line out or if it doesn't look good, replacing, but we don't have a full cost on replacing, so. I
Well,
don't
we
know.
do, we do basically on the whole face, but we did the rock and all those other costs.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
My closing thoughts are I feel like there's more conversation with the signage that's not resolved enough to come up with do one or the other. We might be placing more signage, moving things around. Could we table this to another council and have them start to another workshop because they didn't have enough time to get to a conclusion?
We can,
It's
yeah.
on the regular
Well,
agenda.
Mayor, we
Regular
could,
agenda.
with your approval, Mayor, we could recess, motion to recess and then revisit it during our council meeting.
Sure.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we'll be adjourned here and take a 3-minute break, and
Yeah, yeah.
Tara will put the timer on for 3 minutes. I like